I don't know how many of you saw or read about what Mr. Rogers was taught when he was a little boy. When Mr. Rogers was grown up and people asked him, what do we tell children when something horrible has happened? Mr. Rogers said, when I was little and watching something horrible on TV, something real that had happened was horrible, my mother always said, look for the rescuers. And my story is about that. People say there is a lot of evil in the world today. I witnessed one example of evil when I went to Oklahoma City 10 years after the bombing of the federal building there. And I went to the Oklahoma City National Memorial, the site of that bombing that happened on April 19th, 1995. On the outside of the memorial, there's a large plot of grass on the left side. And on that plot of grass are a large number of bronze chairs, mostly large, but some of them small. To the right of where I was standing was an old gnarled tree, but its branches were covered with green leaves. It was still alive, despite being old and gnarled. That resonates a little, doesn't that? I had never said it quite that way before. Gnarled. Okay, old and gnarled. But beyond that old gnarled tree was a large group of trees, all of one kind, all of the same height, obviously planted at the same time. Then I went into the museum. And the first thing I saw was a film taken from a traffic helicopter that flew by the federal building minutes after the bomb went off. The announcer said, there's the federal building, but the middle of it is gone. The middle's just not there anymore. It looked like a giant had taken the middle third of it out of it. I learned that grass plot on the left side was the exact footprint of that building. They had taken it all down, and that was part of the memorial. And the chairs on it, there was one chair for each victim. 149 large chairs for the 149 adults, including 3 women who were pregnant. They had 2 names on those. And 19 small chairs, because unfortunately, there was a daycare center in that building. And 19 preschoolers were killed. I learned in their gallery of honor about those 168 victims. They had a little display for each of them, usually pictures of them with their families. For the children, sometimes their little sneakers or a favorite toy. I learned about the survivors. There were over 800 survivors in that building. And that gnarled tree that I'm identifying with, they call the survivor's tree. It had been in the parking lot during the bombing, and it had survived. So that represents the survivors. And that grove of trees beyond, that's the rescuers' orchard. 10,000 rescuers came to that site. Searching, helping initially, and then searching for the bodies left in the rubble. And I learned that there are over 300 buildings in Oklahoma City. They were also damaged by the bomb. It was a tremendous blast. And I could see neighborhoods beyond the tall city buildings. And a third of the people in Oklahoma City either knew a victim or a survivor. Then, because a special event was taking place, because it was the 10th anniversary, I got to hear some people speak. I got to hear one survivor tell her story. It was 9 o'clock, a regular 9 o'clock morning. I was at my desk. There was an unbelievably loud explosion. It was suddenly all dark. I couldn't see anything. I tried to move, but nothing was where it had been. But people started calling out. And together, we found each other in the dark, and then we found a way out to the light. When I got outside, a man was passing by, and he took one look at me, and he said, "Lady, you're bleeding." And he took off his shirt and helped me press it around my head, where I indeed was bleeding. And then he said, I'll stay with you, and I'll find where you're supposed to go. Eventually, we found a place with an emergency technician, an EMT, and he looked at me. He looked me over. He said, "You'll need help, but you're pretty much okay. Why don't you sit here on the curb?" And so I went to give the man his shirt. He said, "No, you keep it." So I sat on the curb, and finally the EMT said, "Here's your hotel courtesy van." And I said, I don't want to go to a hotel. He goes, "I know, you're going to a hospital, but we've run out of ambulances. So the hotels are sending their courtesy vans for people like you who aren't hurt that badly." So we got into a courtesy van. The driver said, "All right, I was told to take you to the Veterans Hospital. Does anyone know where that is?" Someone did, and we got there. I was taken care of. I had over 120 stitches taken. The next day I was home, and my family came to help. I got a phone call from a good friend of mine. "Can I do something for you? Do you need any food? Can I?" And I said, No, that's all right. My family is here." "No, really, can I do something for you?" And I realized that she needed to do something to help, and I needed to receive her help. So I said, "My kitchen floor needs mopping." My friend came over and mopped that floor like it's never been mopped before. And then I got a call from a neighbor. We knew each other's names. We said hi. We, chatted now and then, but not a good friend. He called me up and said, "I want to mow your lawn for the rest of the growing season." And then she paused and said, "I know not all of you are from Oklahoma City, so I need to tell you, here we have a really long growing season." So I said, "That's all right. If you just mow it for twice this week." Twice in April? Geez. "That'll be fine." He said, No. I want to do it for the whole season." And again, I realized he needed to give and I needed to receive. So I said, "Thank you very much." Then I heard a rescuer tell his story. He was a fireman from Oklahoma City. He said, every day we would walk through the chain link fence that partitioned off the bomb site, and the friends and relatives of the people who hadn't been found yet would cheer us. They were cheering us. We were doing our jobs. We were going to be looking for pieces of their loved ones, yet they cheered us. It was rough on our clothes working in the site. There were all kinds of sharp edges and dirt. So a call was put out for clothing. We got more than we could use. We had to donate it to the Salvation Army and Goodwill. Rescuers came from all over the country. There were 10,000 of us. And the ones from out of town stayed on cots in the convention center. One of them told me, "Every time when I go back to my cot, the clothes I had worn the previous day were washed and folded and waiting for me. My cot had been neatly made up, the edge turned down, and there was a candy on my pillow." People cared. He said, a call went out for blood. People waited hours in line to donate blood. And he said, and what amazed me maybe the most was the calls to the police station and fire stations dropped by 50% in the weeks following the disaster. I guess people knew we were doing something more important than the trivial things that they sometimes called us about. And then I heard the father of a victim tell his story. Bud Welch lost his only child, 23-year-old Julie, a girl with a beautiful smile and a big, warm heart. He said, "After the bombing, I wanted those men to be caught and I wanted them to fry. Even though I was from a family who had always been against the death penalty, I wanted them to fry." It was a horrible time for me. I kept on smoking and drinking more and more and more until a few months later, I hit bottom. And I thought, do I want the men caught? Yes. Do I want them convicted? Yes. Do I want them killed? And I decided, if I wanted them killed, I was filled with the same thoughts of hatred and revenge which caused them to bomb the building, and I didn't want to join them. So I decided, no, I didn't want them killed. Now, I wanted them locked up in a cage for the rest of their lives. Let's get that straight. But I didn't want them killed anymore. I started working against the death penalty in Oklahoma. One night, I was flipping channels, and I paused and heard, "And after this commercial break, we'll have an interview with the father of Timothy McVeigh." I wanted to change the channel, but I couldn't. I watched that interview. It was very strange. He was outside weeding his garden. He never looked at the interviewer. He never looked at the camera. But finally, at the very end, he looked up. And I saw a face I recognized. I saw the face of a father in despair, the face I saw in my mirror every morning. And I vowed that someday I wanted to meet him and tell him that I did not hold him responsible for what his son had done. Bud Welch kept that kept that vow. He met Mr. McVeigh, and together they worked on trying to prevent the death penalty, but that didn't happen. Timothy McVeigh was killed. Bud Welch ended his talk by saying, "I wake up every day proud of having been Julie's father. Mr. McVeigh wakes up with a noose around his neck." So the special event was over. I went back outside. I saw the grass plot, the footprint of the building, and saw the chairs for each of the victims. And I thought about them and their family and friends. I saw my gnarled old tree and thought about the 800 survivors and their families and friends. And I looked at the rescuers' orchard and thought about the 10,000 rescuers that came and all the people that helped the rescuers. And I looked out beyond the office buildings to the neighborhoods and thought of all the people in Oklahoma City who helped. People say there's a lot of evil in the world today, but I say, especially in the face of evil, there is a tremendous amount of good. Thank you.